the English entry point for their war in the Netherlands, for soldiers, munitions, profiteers and spies, was the fortified town of Vlissingen, which the English called Flushing.
Just as in the Cold War, spying was the secret theatre of the Elizabethan world. And here in Flushing, a chain of events began which would have a dramatic impact on Shakespeare's career. Among Elizabeth's spies here that winter were two men known to Shakespeare. The first was his neighbour in Bishopsgate, Robert Pooley.
Among Elizabeth's state papers are the payments to Pooley for his trips here to Flushing and on to Antwerp and The Hague and Brussels on Her Majesty's secret matters of great importance. We'll hear more about Robert Pooley in this story. But who else turns up among these papers here in Flushing? But the man whose plays were wowing the London crowds at the Rose Theatre, Christpher Marlowe.
Marlowe had been recruited as a spy at Cambridge.
Now, as any spy master will tell you, spies are supposed to be unobtrusive and discreet. But Christpher Marlowe wasn't that sort of guy. He loved to tread on people's toes, and the more offence, the better. Try this. Those who love not tobacco and boys are fools.
Protestants are hypocritical asses. Jesus was a bastard, the Virgin Mary was a whore, and John the Evangelist, Christ's bedfellow.
That was typical Marlowe. Blasphemy, of course, was a crime, but treason was worse. Marlowe was sharing a room with an informer who had much more serious evidence.
Marlowe had been talking about going over to the Catholic side, and even worse, counterfeiting English money before joining the enemy.
Marlowe was sent back to England. From that moment, he was on borrowed time. But in early 1593, there were worse things than a bad review. Two printers were executed for publishing seditious books. The playwright Thomas Kyd was put to the rack. And at the end of May, Marlowe's luck finally ran out.
In 1593, when the boatmen took you down river from the city to Deptford, you arrived here at the Watergate. There was a row of houses with gardens going down to the river. And this was where Christpher Marlowe had made his rendezvous.
The Elizabethan Watergate where Marlowe came that day is still here. Tucked in by the wall of Elizabeth's naval dockyard. Legend has it that Marlowe's last hours were spent in a tavern, but it was a government-safe house run by Mrs. Eleanor Bull, a relative of the spy master Walsingham. And one of the row of houses still survives.
All three men that Marlowe had arranged to meet here were on the seamy side of Elizabeth's body politic. And all three of them, like Marlowe, had connections with her spy master, Francis Walsingham. First, Ingram Frizzer, speculator, dealer, fixer, a modern man. Second, Nicholas Skeers, con man, racketeer, blackmailer, but a government employee. He'd been the government's plant in the Babington plot, which had brought down Mary, Queen of Scots. And then there was the third man, Robin Pooley.
The evil genius of the Elizabethan underworld, Pooley was not a man to be trapped with in a little room in Deptford. What was the meeting for? We don't know. But in the eyes of authoritarian states, writers are always dangerous, especially when their words can reach the masses. Marlowe's latest play, Edward II, had been a scathing attack on a corrupt ruler and a fawning court.
About 6 o'clock in the evening, the four men came back into the room. Christpher Marlowe, at this point, was lying on a bed. And we know about the bed because of the coroner's inquisition. And according to the inquest, the other three were still sitting at table, and Marlowe and Frizzer were exchanging malicious words with each other. And Frizzer was sitting with his back to Marlowe, like this. Marlowe got up off the bed, came behind Frizzer, took his dagger out and pummeled him on the head, wounding him. And at this point, said the witnesses, and of course, we've only got their version of the story, the said Frizzer then struggled with the said Christpher Marlowe to get back from him his dagger aforesaid. And in that affray, the said Frizzer, in defence of his life, with the dagger aforesaid, to the value of 12 pence, gave the said Christpher there and then a mortal wound over the right eye to the depth of 2 inches, of which the said Christpher Marlowe there and then instantly died.
The killers agreed on their story. It was just a fight over the bill, the reckoning. Shakespeare, though, thought otherwise. Not to understand a man's verses, he later wrote, can kill a man more dead than a great reckoning in a little room. "1593 was the tale of 2 young men for whom the sky was the limit. Marlowe, brilliant devil-may-care, who chose as his motto, 'What feeds me will destroy me.'